How are the Bears? What's going to be their best way to score against this team? What they do is they give up a lot of yards on play action and a lot of yards after the catch. So as much as they don't allow the explosives, I think that there's going to be some opportunities for the receivers to get some big plays.
I agree with you, Peg. And I think if you can get extended drives, if you can get drives that are 8 plays or more, 10 plays or more, then I think that takes a toll on Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis. And so I think that rather than being big guys that have great ability, they become big guys that are a little tired at the point of attack or on the line of scrimmage. And then I think you can have sustained pass blocking at the line of scrimmage.
There's a lot of Eagles fans who are thinking, even the Eagles social media site is basically thinking that their struggles will end this week's game with the Bears, and that this is their get-right game, and that everything that has plagued them will go away because the Bears are the perfect opponent. Is it good that they're thinking that way, or is it they're thinking this way?
I think they're a little out over their skis, especially a 21-point collapse that they had last week, even though it was a difficult division game in Dallas. And when the Philly was winning, it was all Philly crowd. And then all of a sudden Dallas turned it around and it became a Dallas crowd. So, listen, nothing's going to be easy. Nothing's easy in the NFL. And if you think the Bears are sitting there going, oh, man, everything's downhill from here, now it's just got to finish out the season, get ready for the playoffs, that is not the narrative of Ben Johnson. And what I've come to appreciate most about Ben Johnson is the seriousness of his approach in and week out, and takes nothing for granted, puts high expectations on everybody on this team to be physically and mentally prepared. And when the Bears had to go into the roster last week, the guys that were they were mentally ready and they physically performed. So, Philly can think that way leading up into the game, but hopefully the Bears, will tell a different story.
Tom, I think one of the best stories in this game is the chess match that will be on display Friday between Ben Johnson, one of the best young offensive minds in the game, versus one of the most accomplished veteran defensive coordinators in Vic Fangio. How do you expect these guys to play that game of chicken?
I think of who inserts personnel the first will kind of dictate what they're going to run. The thing about it, T. Waddle and Peggy, offensive coordinators, they like to run a lot of window dressing, formation, personnel groupings, splits by the receivers, multiple tight ends, all these different things that make the players on the field that have to go through the thinking process during the cadence. Then you get guys like Vic Fangio, who Ben Johnson referred to him as the godfather of defensive coordinators because his system is being played by a lot of different teams. They try to look the same every play. So now it's going to be what can Caleb and the offense figure out during the cadence, and then how can Vic Fangio disguise what he's going to do until the ball is snapped. And that's one of the things that I think that you'll appreciate the most about this football game is a super young, clever play caller like Ben facing extremely experienced defensive play caller like Vic Fangio, and I think that'll be one of the funnest observations of this game.
Not only that, but it's the play action that Ben Johnson runs and that Caleb is really starting to get into a nice rhythm in getting comfortable with. And there are times when they run what looks like the same guys in motion. Like there was that play last week with Luther Burden, and they ran the 2 tight ends both in motion. Well, the last time they ran it, it was a run play. Then they ran it last week and it ended up opening up the middle for the 3rd tight end. So it's really Caleb and how well he is starting to master some of that deception, and really against like a defense that is going to just try to keep on their keys, right?
That's a great point, because one thing about play action, and Declan Doyle brought it up today in his address to the media, that how good that Caleb Williams is getting with play action. And last week he had a good play, too, where he's able to completely turn his back to the line of scrimmage and turn his focus and know exactly where his target's going to be. But to me, as an ex-offensive lineman, Peg, there's nothing better against a good defensive line than play action. Because if I'm a right guard and I got Jalen Carter over the top of me and he thinks that I'm going to be responsible for him, then all of a sudden Darnell Wright slides down to hit him or Drew Dahlman slides his way to hit him. And now you got this hesitation in the heads of the defensive tackles before they try to get off the ball because they don't know what angle they're going to be attacked from. And the way to allow an offensive line to be at their most aggressive without necessarily not having to get extreme movement or sustain the block for 2 or 3 seconds, it's play action. And so everything that you just brought up, whether it's the receivers and their pre-snap movement or post-snap movement or their route landmarks or Caleb being able to have a nice play action fake from DeAndre Swift to Monangai or even if Britton Brown's in the game, all those little elements of surprise, I think can create that instant of hesitation on the first and second level of that defense that may allow you to get to your open throw or take advantage of a coverage that you see during your cadence that you would like to take advantage of. And one thing about play action, if you can get that defense to react 3/4 to a step out of position, that's enough to slow their recovery down where you could take advantage of it.
Tom, if I would have told you before week 1 kicked off that in week 13, when the Bears traveled to Philadelphia to face the Eagles on Black Friday, that the Bears would get the edge on the offensive line, what would you have told me then and what do you tell me now?
I do believe it now because I heard someone say on TV that they believe that the Bears have the best offensive line in our division, which I think is high praise when you take everything into consideration that's said about the offensive line and their development and new offensive line coach Dan Rochar from where they started to where they're at. So I'm super encouraged by that. And to me is, you know, the group that you want to have the most confidence in on a football team is probably the offense and defensive lines. And if you can continue to build that confidence, and Darnell is playing a much more physical brand of football than he started the season to where he's at now. The interior three are getting to know each other better, not only how they can help each other, but they can help the offensive tackle positions. And I think it's really exciting to think the group of guys that they brought in on the interior and the continuous development of the outside guys, and then the way Ozzie played last week against a team that has a real exterior rushing reputation. I do think, and I think that Ben is not hesitant to make any type of calls he feels fit, that whether it's early running game in some of these games or 18 straight passes in last week's game. So I think it's remarkable what Dan Rochar has been able to do. And, you know, I like the increased competitiveness that he has on the roster and makes all these guys work harder and stay hungry.
I was looking at the Eagles' schedule this year, and only one game was not a 7-point game, 7 points or less, a 1-score game. They don't give up a lot of points. They have an excellent red zone defense. They don't allow explosives with their shell defense. How are the Bears? What's going to be their best way to score against this team? What they do is they give up a lot of yards on play action and a lot of yards after the catch. So as much as they don't allow the explosives, I think that there's going to be some opportunities for the receivers to get some big plays.
I agree with you, Peg. And I think if you can get extended drives, if you can get drives that are 8 plays or more, 10 plays or more, then I think that takes a toll on Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis. And so I think that rather than being big guys that have great ability, they become big guys that are a little tired at the point of attack or on the line of scrimmage. And then I think you can have sustained pass blocking at the line of scrimmage. But the thing about it is a lot of these tip balls that Jordan has and stuff is because of you're getting stalemated at the line of scrimmage. And sometimes that if you get stalemated at the line of scrimmage, that's the reason where you're getting these tip balls from. And then it kind of, that's what you want to avoid if you are, getting these guys exhausted and they're not getting off the line of scrimmage.
Tom, the team will tell you that they've approached this game the way they approach every single game. But from your chair, do you consider this kind of one of these measuring stick games because this is probably the best team they have faced since week 2 against the Detroit Lions? And do you believe this is an opportunity for them to kind of really, arrive on the national stage? I've said I think that, nationally they're a really good story. If they go to Philadelphia and beat the Eagles, they become a really good team from the national perspective.
Yeah, T. Waddle, and anytime that you're the team that has just won the most recent of Super Bowls, you're the team that's sitting at the top of the totem pole, and everybody considers their season a success if you beat them, whether it's at home or on the road. And everything that Ben has said since the moment he got here, I believe, and that's why I have so much faith in this team, is because of their resiliency at the end of the games and some of the big wins they've had. But, yeah, when you go up against a marquee franchise who has the reputation that Philly has gained and earned over the last 3 or 4 years, if you go into Philly and you beat those guys, it's going to do a lot for you in terms of future confidence. Am I gonna panic if worst case scenario happens and they didn't win the game, because I'd rather them beat Green Bay? But never mind, it's still a benchmark game that can do a lot for the remaining games on your schedule.
What Tom, real quick, what do you think the best result from tomorrow's Green Bay Detroit game would be for the Bears?
I don't know, man. I don't want to say bad things about people, who may necessarily getting nicked up or something. But
how about a tie where everybody? Well, I don't want to say that either because then I'll get hurt. So how about just a tie?
So you got Dan Campbell calling the plays for Detroit. If all of a sudden he starts calling the plays and they don't know if that's the best decision or not, then all of a sudden you have controversy built inside that organization. And then I guess from the hands of the Green Bay Packers, when you got Micah Parsons or you're trying to figure out what Jordan Love really is, if one of the two teams can settle on some of those questions the most, maybe that gives them a little spark going into the remainder of the season. But damn, Waddle, I wish you didn't ask that question because I don't have an answer for you.
No, I'm with you. I look at these teams too, and after week 2, most of us said, wow, that Detroit team has got their act together even without their 2 coordinators from last year. I look at them now, Tom, and I think in a lot of ways they're confused. It's why Dan Campbell took over. And then and Dan, instead of making aggressive decisions and being the CEO of the team, is now calling plays. They look a little out of sync to me, if I could say so myself.
T, we are on a team that when Greg Landry was the offensive coordinator and we kind of hit a stall, Ditka would go to him, rip the play sheet out of his hands and start calling the plays himself. And that's where he might call 5 slant 45s in a row. And that's never a good thing. But, he just became frustrated as quick as anybody. So, and I always thought that Dan Campbell is the most Ditka-like coach since Ditka. Yep. And so maybe they do have some similarities in their frustration, because the first game that he did become a play caller, I think he called 6 consecutive plays to Jameis Williams. And that's where his frustration lied, that they weren't using him enough. So then he called a series to him. But, maybe that wasn't the best decision for him to make, because it seemed like he had made a culture change up there and he had things rolling in a really positive direction. But he's got so much pressure on him to win a Super Bowl this year or in the immediate future that maybe that pressure that he puts on the team and on himself is too much for him to take a stalled offense.
Well, this is going to be interesting because we have a lot to watch for tomorrow and a big game, probably the number one game right now on the Bears schedule.
Peg, I got one more quick question
Yeah.
for Tom. Frank Ragnow has announced that he is coming out of retirement. Tom, what do you think of that, and how prepared do you think he will be right away?
Wow.
I mean, he's coming out of retirement, and then, like, is he immediately on the roster? And it's like that. I think is it Graham? What's his last name? Brandon Graham, who just came out of retirement. Brandon Graham, yeah, he's a 16-year player. Now he's got a pulled groin.
Yeah.
So when you look at something like that, it kind of hurts you a little bit, because you're not physically ready in the demands of either extremely cold weather or hot weather when you play indoors like Detroit. If you're not physically ready, man, if you haven't been out there just busting your hump and doing things that are really unrealistically in terms of conditioning, it's going to be difficult to be ready, especially if you're an offensive lineman and you want to participate in, on the average, 65 to 72 plays a game.